All right, last week was a little bit complicated with the numbers and the dates. So now we'll move on to the last stage of the flood, the story with the raven and the dove. So we're in chapter 8, verse 6. Vayhi miketz arba'im yom, and it was at the end of 40 days. That means 40 days after the mountains became visible. Vayiftach Noach es chalon hateva asher asa. Noach opened up the window of the ark, the window that he had made in the ark, which we talked about in the past. There's at the beginning of the parsha, he's told to make a tzohar, which is some type of artificial lighting, which one opinion says is a special stone that gives light. The other opinion says it's a window. But as we said there, both opinions agree that there was a window. So here he opened up the window, and he opened up the window. Vaishalach es ha'orev, and he sent out the orev, which is usually translated as raven. Vayetze yatso vashov, this raven went out and back. He kept on circling. Ad yevoshes hamayim me'al haaretz, until the water had dried up from the land. So the raven never really finished his mission. He didn't go out and find out whether there was dry land. He just kept on circling. Now, as I said, the orev is usually translated as raven. I read somewhere that that's a mistake, which I can't confirm whether that's true or not, but this author claimed that raven is too specific a term for the orev. The correct translation would be crow, because crow is a more general term for more than one species, including the raven. I can neither confirm nor deny, but I can tell you that it says in Shir HaShirim that the orev is black. It's a black bird. We also know that it's a bird of prey, and it's not kosher. It's a non-kosher bird. Whether it's the raven or the crow, whatever it is, it's a non-kosher black bird. It's a bird of prey. And it's described in the Gemara as a particularly cruel bird. I don't know exactly how that exhibits, but it's a bird of prey that I guess is particularly cruel looking, the way it treats its prey. And the Gemara tells us that the raven the orev was the only bird that did not keep the ban against family life. Remember, at the beginning of the flood, Noach was told to enter the ark with his children, and then the wives would enter separately because they weren't allowed to live together. They weren't allowed to have a normal family life in the ark. So that prohibition applied to people, but it also applied to animals. The animals also were not allowed to live together, the male and female animals, in the ark. Now, of course, well, one of two things. Either Noach designed their cages in such a way that the male and female were separate, or the instinct to reproduce was suspended during that time. Either way, none of the animals reproduced, none of them mated during the time of the flood. We're in Perek Ches, Pasuk Zayin. None of the animals mated during the period of the flood, with the exception of the raven, the orev, and the dog, and also Ham, the son of Noach. And why those three is a discussion that I don't really understand, so I'll leave it at that. Those three. So this orev, whether it's the raven or the crow, is getting a lot of negative attention. He's a predator. He's a cruel bird. He sinned in the ark, so to speak. Animals can't sin. They can only follow their instinct. But he didn't keep the ban against mating in the ark, whereas every other bird did, and almost all the other animals. Now, when Noach sent this raven out, I'll just call him a raven, because that's the usual translation. When Noach sent the raven out of the ark, it doesn't say why he sent him. It just says he sent it out the window. Now, in the next verse, he sends out a dove. There it does say why he sent the dove. He sent the dove in order to test whether the waters had cleared up yet. Because if the dove comes back, it means it wasn't able to land. But with the raven, it doesn't say why he sent it. What?
He was able to land.
Yeah, if it doesn't come back, it means he was able to land. Yeah. So with the raven, it doesn't say why he didn't come back. Oh, sorry, why he was sent out. Which is interesting, because most of the commentaries do assume that he was sent out for the same reason. He was sent out to check if the waters had receded, and he didn't do his job. He just kept circling around the ark. But it's interesting, even if that was his job, it's interesting that it doesn't say what his job was, why he was sent. The Or HaChaim, though, says that Noach actually dismissed the raven. He sent him out to get rid of him because he had not kept the ban against mating. He was, quote unquote, a sinful bird. And again, as I said, a bird can't sin. It can only follow his instinct. But he had done something wrong, quote unquote. So Noach sent him away, which is actually the meaning of this word. If you look carefully, the way it says it in Hebrew, it says, Vaishalach es ha'orev. There are two words, the same root, but different forms. There's Vayishlach and Vaishalach. If you know a little bit about how Hebrew works, Vayishlach is in binyan kal, and Vaishalach is in binyan piel. Two different forms of the word.
The first one is Hif'il.
Vayishlach would be kal. Kal, pa'al.
Pa'al. Oh,
Yeah.
it's Pa'al. So one is Pa'al, one is
It's piel, yeah.
What's that?
It's a little too complicated to explain right now. But
Pa'al is like Katav. PL is like Shilem.
it's the lesson for another time. What the difference is.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, it's something that doesn't exist in English, and it's a little hard to describe to English speakers. But suffice to say that there are two different forms. There's really seven, but for our purposes, there are two different forms of this word. It could have said Vayishlach. It says Vaishalach. Same root, different form. And the difference is that Vayishlach means to send on a mission. Right? Both of them mean to send someone away. But Vayishlach means I'm sending you away, but I'm not getting rid of you. I'm sending you on a mission to do something for me, and then you're going to come back and tell me what happened. That's Vayishlach. Vaishalach means to send somebody away. If you want to get rid of somebody, it would say Vaishalach. You're sending him away not to return.
Well, for the Yonah also says Vaishalach.
Well, that's true. We'll get to that. But when you're sending somebody away permanently, not to return to you and tell you what happened, but to leave, you say Vaishalach. Now, it's not always a negative connotation. It could be a negative connotation. You're getting rid of somebody, but it could also be something positive. Let's say you had a guest, and when the meal's over, it's understood that he's going to leave, and he's gone. He's gone. He's not in your house anymore. That's also called Vaishalach. You'd use the PL form to say that it's in verse 8.
Verse 8, 7.
7, sorry, 7. The first word of verse 7. You won't see the difference in the English. It's in the Hebrew only. So when someone's leaving and it's not coming back, that would be the Vaishalach. So that would fit with what the Or HaChaim is saying, that Noach didn't send this bird on a mission. He sent him to leave. He sent him out of the ark. Now, as Dr. Farah pointed out, the same expression is used for the dove also. So as I said, it's not always a negative connotation. It just means you're sending him away. With the dove also, Noach was sending him away in the sense that assuming the water has cleared up, he's welcome to leave. He doesn't have to stay in the ark. He can fly to the nearest hill, and he can remain there if he wants to. Noach sent him out, and if he doesn't come back, that means that the waters have cleared up. Okay, but that's the Orach Chaim. But again, most of the commentators assume that this raven was sent for the same reason as the dove was sent. He was sent in order to find out whether the waters had cleared up, and he didn't do it. He didn't do his job. He circled around the ark, and he never went. Now, Chazal, our sages, tell us a reason why he didn't do his job. As they usually do, they speak sometimes in riddles, and they don't explain what they mean or how it makes sense what they're saying. So I'll repeat the words without trying to give any explanation. The way Chazal say it is that this bird suspected that Noach wanted his mate. Noach wanted the female raven, and therefore the male raven refused to leave. He remained at the ark to guard his wife. Now, again, that's a midrashic interpretation. As usual, it's worded in cryptic language. So I'm not going to try to explain that right now. The simple understanding would probably be that the waters had not cleared up and the bird couldn't go anywhere. Like he flew out of the window, he looked around, birds can see very far, and he didn't see any dry land. He couldn't go anywhere. So he remained, he didn't want to come back and be cramped in the ark. He remained flying back and forth between the windowsill and wherever he flew to, but he didn't go anywhere.
No room.
I don't know if he
Well, he let him go.
Yeah.
So, and he was looking for his mate?
No. Again, this medrash says that he refused to leave.
Oh,
He remained within the vicinity of the ark
okay.
because he thought Noach was going to take his mate.
Okay.
And again, that's in
But he was
cryptic language.
outside
He was outside, yeah.
Just flying around.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have wings, there's no reason to stick around in the ark. It wasn't very comfortable. So, okay, that's kind of a cryptic story there. Whether you work with the midrashic interpretation or not, it's a very cryptic story. There was this bird that Noach sent out. It left. It didn't go anywhere. It came back, but it didn't really come back into the ark. It just kept on circling around. Let's see how the story continues in verse 8. Vaishalach es hayona me'ita. Then he sent out the Yonah, the dove. Lir'os hakalu hamayim me'al pnei adam. And this time it tells us why he sent the bird. He sent him to see if the waters had receded. Now, this is another bird which people, I think, mistranslate. The Yonah is usually translated as dove. I think it would be more accurate to translate it as pigeon, which pigeon and dove are very closely related, or maybe a dove is a type of pigeon, or a pigeon is a type of dove, something like that. They're definitely closely related. But if I'm not mistaken, a Yonah is a pigeon, not a dove. And that's important for us to know.
You need to have a veterinarian.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
People have done this research. But it's important because there are only two birds that the Torah allows on the Mizbeach. When you offer up a korban, a sacrifice, you can offer certain animals, kosher animals. With the birds, there's only two birds you're allowed to bring on the altar. Now, almost all birds are kosher, but only two are allowed on the altar. One is the Yonah, and the other is called a tor. So the tor is a turtle dove. The Yonah is a pigeon. The pigeon is a bird. It's a gray bird. The tor is a brown bird. It's significantly smaller than the pigeon. Both of them are able to fly, but they do a lot of walking, and they're very clumsy birds. If you go to like a heavily populated area, they like to sit around and catch people's scraps. So you find them walking around the streets, around like outside malls and stuff. And when you walk, they'll just let you almost step on them, and then they'll jump up into the air and like fly into your face, and then turn around and fly away. And they make a huge amount of noise with their wings. In case you haven't seen one. So those are pigeons and turtle doves. Those are the two birds that we allow on the Mizbeach. The dove, the Yonah, the pigeon has to be a baby, and the turtle dove has to be an adult. So the pigeon has to be under 12 months, and the turtle dove has to be over 13 months. And then from 12 months to 13 months is where they're maturing, and neither of them are allowed. In any case, so Noach sent this bird, this pigeon, out of the ark. Now, I'm what's the word? Ornithologist? Is that the? I'm not an ornithologist, but from my experience, pigeons don't fly very far. I've never seen a pigeon fly more than like 20 feet. I could be wrong about that, but that's been my experience. So if Noach is sending this pigeon out to see if the water's cleared up, then it would seem that Noach was not able to see out of the window. It must have been a very high window, because if he could see out of the window, he could look 20 miles out into the horizon, or 30 miles. I don't know why he would send a pigeon. The pigeon is going to fly 20 feet and then come back. So it seems like the window was pretty low, and he needed a bird to go find out whether the water had cleared up.
Yeah, homing pigeons.
I thought those are extinct.
What did you? Homing pigeons?
They have that as a translation of Yonah?
No, I just looked up home. Dove is a smaller version of the pigeon. That's what it says.
Oh, okay.
And then I just looked up homing pigeons because I know they fly far, but maybe.
Oh, do they? Okay. Again, I could be mistaken about pigeons altogether, about how far they fly. In any case, he sent out the raven, and it didn't do its job. He sent out the dove, and as we'll see in the next few verses, it did attempt to do its job. The water hadn't cleared up yet, so it couldn't do anything, but it did attempt to do the job. Now, a story like this, it happened. It's a true story, but it's told in the Torah to teach us a lesson. We're not told almost anything about Noach's time in the ark. He spent an entire year running from animal to animal, feeding them all. Talking about millions of animals. So he went around feeding all these animals for an entire year. It's a long year of work. We're told about this one episode with the birds, which means that it's here to teach us a lesson. And one lesson, this is Rabbi Miller says this, one lesson we can learn from these birds is a Torah principle that the Gemara says, Megalglin zechus al yidei zakai, which means if something good is supposed to happen, anybody could bring it about. Hashem has his plan to make sure something happens. He could use anybody to make sure it happens. But as a rule, he'll pick a good person to make it happen. A good person is the instrument for good things to happen. And a bad person is the instrument for bad things to happen. The Gemara gives the opposite example. The Gemara gives a theoretical example of a person who was climbing up a ladder, and then he fell down and killed somebody by mistake. So the person on the bottom got killed, person on the ladder fell down on him. Why did that happen? Why did the bottom person have to die? And why did the top person have to get into this accident? And the answer is, if you look into the case, and again, this is a theoretical case, but in all situations, if you look into it, you'll discover that the bottom person deserved to die, and the top person deserved to be the instrument for someone else to die. Now, you might not discover the reason. You can look into it. You won't necessarily be able to discover everything in the history of these two people and their various incarnations and whatever else they may have been through in life. But in God's calculation, this bottom person died for a reason. And the top person killed for a reason. It was supposed to happen that way. The raven, which again, the raven is a bird. He's not evil, but he's a symbol of evil because he's this cruel bird of prey who mated in the ark. He's the one who was not successful at telling people that the flood had cleared up. He didn't get to be the messenger for that. The dove, who's this pure bird, innocent bird, who is allowed on the Mizbeach, he's a kosher bird, he's the one who did get to tell people about the end of the flood. Again, we're not talking about the birds themselves. There's nothing good about a dove and there's nothing bad about a raven. But symbolically, symbolizing good and bad people, the dove is the one who got to fulfill this good mission, and the raven did not. Another thing about doves, or yonas, I should say, pigeons, is that the Jewish people are compared to a pigeon, a yonah. In Shir HaShirim. In Shir HaShirim, also in Tehillim, the Jewish people are compared to a pigeon. Is that what it says there?
No.
Oh.
Just
Okay.
make a lot of noise when we flap our wings.
Oh. Yeah, Jews do make a lot of noise. When you have 2% of the population being Jewish, everybody knows about them. There's menorahs in every park, and there's...
That's true.
I remember back in Iran, my uncle had a cage of the pigeons, and he loved it, and we loved it. We were going always to look at them. Yeah, it was just amazing that he had it in his house.
That's the Jewish people. The Jewish people are compared to a pigeon in Shir HaShirim and in Tehillim also. And the symbolism behind that, one piece of symbolism might be the fact that the pigeon is a very peaceful bird. He doesn't hurt anybody. He's just walks around and eats scraps. And Jews also are very peaceful people. But that's not what the Medrash says. The Medrash says that the comparison between the Jewish people and the Yonah is that a pigeon is one of those birds, not the only one, but one of the birds that mates for life. A pigeon picks a mate, and that's the only mate he'll ever have. And I think even if the mate dies, the pigeon won't mate again. It picks one mate, and that's it. Which is a symbol for the loyalty of the Jewish people to God. That we're loyal to God, we don't worship any other idols, not that we never did, but as a rule, as a nation, we're loyal to one God. So that's part of the symbolism of the dove. Verse 9. Pasuk Tes. V'lo matza'ah hayona manoach l'chaf ragla. The Yonah, the pigeon, did not find a resting place for its foot. It wasn't able to land anywhere. Batashav elav el hateva. So it returned to him, to the ark. The raven didn't return. It just kept circling. But the Yonah came back. The pigeon came back. Kimayim al panei kol haaretz, because the water was covering the land. Vayishlach yado vayikacheha. Noach put forth his hand, and he took the dove. Vayavei osa elav el hateva, and he brought it to him into the ark. Now here's the other form. It says vayishlach, not vayshalach. Because here Noach didn't send his hand away to not come back. His hand is attached to his body. He stretched out his hand, took the dove, and brought him back in. So the Yonah went out, the pigeon went out, it did not find a resting place. The expression used here is manoach l'chaf ragla, a resting place for its foot. That expression appears again somewhere else. As again, Rabbi Miller points this out. The other time we find this expression, manoach l'kaf regel, is in the tochacha, in the rebuke at the end, not the end, but toward the end of Devarim, the tochacha that we read before Rosh Hashanah. It talks about all the terrible things that will happen to the Jewish people if they don't keep the Torah. And one of the things that happens is, lo yia manoach l'kaf raglecha, there won't be a resting place for your feet. Meaning the Jewish people are going to go into exile, and they're not going to land in one place and stay there. They're going to have to go from place to place, which we know historically came true, along with everything else that the Torah predicts. That happened historically. The Jews went to Persia, or first Babylon, which became Persia. They did remain there for a long time, but as time went on, they ended up moving to Germany and Spain. And then during the Crusades, a lot of the Jews had to leave Germany. A lot of them were killed out. Some people went to Poland. And then from there, they ended up in Russia. And the Spanish Jews were expelled several times. And they ended up all over the Middle East. And the French Jews were expelled several times. And the English Jews were expelled, forget the year, but they were expelled sometime in the Middle Ages, and they remained out of England until Oliver Cromwell. They remained for 400 years, they were kicked out of England. Jews have been expelled from everywhere they lived, and then finally, in more recent times, the entire European Jewish community was destroyed, and they moved to America and to Israel. And the Sephardic communities were not expelled, but they had to leave because of political pressures, and there's almost nobody left in the historic homes of the Sephardic Jews in the Middle East. They're now in Israel or here in America or elsewhere. And even in America, where we don't get expelled, but you can go to any major city in this country and you can find old Jewish communities which are gone. You can find churches all over the place with Hebrew letters on them. In all the downtown areas and all the various places where Jews have been over time. South side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago, Harlem, Dorchester in Boston, and 1,001 other places across the country. Jews can't rest in one place because that's what the Torah says. You're going to leave, you're going to be sent into exile, and you're going to end up going from place to place. Lo yeh manoach lekaf raglecha, there will never be a resting place for your feet in exile. This Yonah, this pigeon, to which the Jewish people are compared, symbolically experienced this. He left the ark, and there was no resting place for his feet. And he had to keep flying and then come back and wait until he could go again. Now, there is one place where we are able to rest, even in the exile. And it's not Israel. Israel is not the exile. The one place we're able to rest in the exile is Shabbos. And that's what we say in Zmiros. In the Zmiros on Shabbos morning, we say, Yonah matzah bo manoach. Literally the pigeon found on Shabbos, a resting place. So that refers to this pigeon who eventually found a place to rest on Shabbos, but it also refers to the Jewish people. The Jewish people can't rest anywhere, but Shabbos is their place where they can rest. Once a week, they have a little bit of peace. V'sham yanuchu yigiei koach. That phrase ends. There, on Shabbos, the tired out people can rest. So Shabbos is the one place where we can rest. Yeah. Another one of the Zmiros that we say on Friday night has a line which says, Ohavei Hashem, people who love Hashem, Hamechakim bevinyan Ariel, who are waiting for the rebuilding of the temple. B'yom haShabbos sisu v'simchu. On Shabbos, they can rejoice, which means we're waiting for the temple to be rebuilt, which we're sad about. We're not happy that the temple's not here. We're waiting for it. But on Shabbos, we can rejoice as if it was already here. So Shabbos is as if we have completed our mission. We're back from the exile, and we're back in the temple. This is something that applies to people who celebrate Shabbos. People who keep Shabbos have this one day of rest where they're able to rest from their wandering in the exile. But back to the story, in Noach, this dove, the raven didn't find a place to, the raven kept circling. He didn't do his job. And the Yonah, the pigeon, flew away, but had to come back. He couldn't find a place to rest. In Pasuk Yud, in verse 10, Vayachel od shivas yamim achirim. Noach waited another 7 days. Now, from the fact that it says another 7 days, it implies that the first time he also waited 7 days. So he sent, after 40 days, once the mountains became visible, he waited 40 days. He sent out the raven. He waited 7 days. Then he sent out the Yonah, the pigeon. Now he waited another 7 days. Vayosef shalach es hayonah min hateva. And he again continued to send the Yonah from the ark. Vatavo elav hayonah la'is erev. And the pigeon came back to the ark toward evening. V'hinei alei zayis taraf b'fiha. And behold, it had an olive branch torn off in its mouth, meaning torn off the tree. There was an olive branch in his mouth. Vayeda Noach, and Noach knew ki kalu hamayim al haaretz, that the water had receded from the earth, or at least begun to recede. Receded enough that the bird was able to find an olive branch. What's the significance of the olive branch? People the dove has become a symbol of peace, and the olive branch has become a symbol of peace. Because this dove found the olive branch was a symbol of peace between us and God. That's not at all what the Torah says. We'll see soon what the Torah says about this symbol of the dove. But there's nothing especially peaceful about it. There's nothing unpeaceful either, but it's not a symbol of peace.
Okay.
Let's see what this symbolism is of this olive branch that the Yonah found, the pigeon found. So first of all, from the perspective of the pigeon, he went and found an olive branch and he brought it back. Why did he pick up the olive branch? Pigeons don't eat olive branches. They eat, I don't know what they eat, but they don't eat olive branches. But they do pick them up all the time because they like to build nests. Whenever they see anything, they pick it up and bring it back to build a nest with it. And if you ever had pigeons on your porch or somewhere near your house, which I've often had in various places I've lived, you'll sometimes see little piles of sticks and pens and anything that looks like a stick, because that's what pigeons do. They find a stick and they bring it for their nest. Now, the normal time to do that, at least what I've observed, is in the springtime. And this story happened in the fall. But we can excuse the pigeon if his circadian rhythms were a little off. After a year in the ark, he would have been very confused. And when he saw an olive branch, he picked it up to make a nest out of.
The question is, did the trees survive this one?
So that's the big question. Where did he get this olive branch from? Because even if the water had receded, there wouldn't be any living trees. And it sounds like this was a living olive branch because it says taraf. It was ripped off a tree. It wasn't just, he didn't find just some debris somewhere. He found an actual tree. And the Gemara discusses where he got this olive branch from. One opinion says that he got it from Israel because the flood didn't reach Israel, which is a miracle. Because if there's that much water, well, first of all, if it's raining everywhere, it would rain in Israel too. And the water would spill over to Israel. But miraculously, Israel did not experience the flood according to this opinion. Another opinion says that he actually entered the Garden of Eden and found this olive branch. Whichever one you go with, we're going to have to assume that the way he got there was by landing on the way. He must have landed in order to be able to fly that far. You'd have to land, which means that there must have been land to land on. So this pigeon, he found, wherever he found it, he found an olive branch, and he brought it back. Presumably in his mind, he was trying to build a nest. That's also a symbol for the Jewish people. As soon as the flood was over, first thing it did was go to build a nest. And that's been the fate of the Jewish people, but also the courage of the Jewish people. Wherever we've gone, whenever there's a big tragedy, a note just came up that pigeons build nests both in spring and in fall. So I guess pigeons build nests in the fall also, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So okay, that would answer it. That would explain it. So building a nest, that's a symbol, again, for the Jewish people. The Jewish people have gone through many times of destruction, and the first thing they did afterwards was rebuild. You have the destruction of the temple, the first temple, and the first thing we read about in the book of Daniel is the Sanhedrin setting up a place to live and a Jewish life in Babylon. And after the second temple was destroyed, again, you have whatever was left of the Jewish people regrouping and recreating their Jewish life. And the same thing after the Crusades and all the expulsions and all of the pogroms, and after the Holocaust. That's the most recent one. That's the one we can remember. There are multiple stories of communities which just rebuilt. The Mir Yeshiva is the one yeshiva that escaped Europe and made it intact. They spent the war in Japan, or China rather, and then came to America, most of them. But the most interesting part of that story that I read about is that while they were in China, they were in Shanghai, they started a boys' school and a girls' school and a printing press. And they built everything they needed. They didn't just wait for the war to end. They continued life the way they were living in Europe. It wasn't comfortable. It was very hot and humid, and they didn't have what they needed, but they built themselves a whole community in Shanghai. And then they came to America. Rabbi Aaron Cutler, when he came to America in 1941, during the war, it is said that when he arrived off the boat, people came to greet him. And they asked him what's happening in Europe. And he said, we're not going to talk about what's happening in Europe. We need to rebuild. We need to rebuild in America. And it's not because he didn't care. I mean, he spent the rest of the war organizing rescue efforts. All of the different organizations which were quarreling with each other, he united them all the Reform and the Orthodox organizations, he united them all, and he made one joint organization that would work together, or he tried to at least, that would work together to get Jews out of Europe by any means possible. So he definitely cared, and he definitely realized that there was something he could do about it, but he didn't want to talk about the past. He wanted to rebuild. And the same is told about Reb Elie Meir Bloch, whose yahrzeit was today, the founder of the Telz Yeshiva in Cleveland. He came to America also in 1940, before Russia was invaded. And then Russia was invaded. He lost communication with his family and friends. But he opened up the yeshiva, and he remained there for the rest of his life. In 1946, I believe, is when he heard, I mean, he assumed it all along, but it was when he actually heard that his family and his entire town had been killed on one day. The first thing he did, he wrote down, it's written, so it's printed. He said, don't suspect me of being a cold person who doesn't care about my family, but we need to rebuild. We need to build. So that's been the Jewish attitude, always, was always to rebuild. As soon as something got destroyed, right away we rebuild our lives and we continue our mission. And this pigeon symbolizes that for us. The first thing he did after the flood, of course, it's just his instinct, but symbolically, the first thing he did after the flood was to pick up an olive branch and bring it back to build his nest. Now, it is true that this pigeon, in his own little mind, was thinking of building a nest. But the Torah uses a very interesting wording when it refers to this nest. Two things that the Torah does. Number one is it tells us what kind of branch this was, which is really not important. It could have been any kind of branch. The Torah tells us it was an olive branch. The other thing the Torah does here is it uses the expression taraf b'fiha, which means that the branch was ripped off of a tree. But another meaning of the word taraf or tarif is food. As it says, hatrifeni lechem chuki. Give me my daily bread. A prayer to Hashem to give us our daily bread. Hatrifeni lechem chuki. So although again, the pigeon was thinking about a nest, but the Torah expresses it as if it was eating this branch. It's referring to the olive branch as food, and it's in the mouth of the bird. So Chazal tell us, the Gemara tells us, that there's a hint here. Not that the bird was thinking about this, but the Torah is thinking about it. And Noach also got the message. He saw the symbolism. That this bird is as if eating the olive branch. Now, the bird had plenty of food. Noach was feeding it. And Noach fed the bird whatever pigeons like to eat. But the bird was as if telling Noach, I don't want to have your food. I don't want food from a person. I want food from God. And even if it's an olive branch, which is an olive is bitter, and it's not something that I usually eat, I'd rather get an olive branch from God than to get good food from a person. Now, that was the lesson that the pigeon teaches Noach and teaches us. He prefers to be fed by God, even if it's going to be not such good food, rather than to be fed by a human being. But of course, the real lesson there is not for pigeons, it's for people. As the Ramban expresses, if that's how birds feel, then certainly that's how people feel, which is true. People are very uncomfortable taking food from other people. We're very uncomfortable if we have to get a handout from somebody else. It makes us very uncomfortable. And that's an emotion that we all recognize. We're all aware of it. But it's hard to understand. Why is it that we're so uncomfortable taking gifts from other people? What is it about taking a gift that makes us so uncomfortable? Perhaps the Torah is here telling us what is so uncomfortable about it. What's uncomfortable about it is that we want to be fed by God. We don't want to be fed by people. Now, of course, we're always fed by people. Our food always comes through people because somebody was out there farming the land and shipping the food and stocking the shelves at the grocery store. There's always people involved, but we're always giving something back. So they're giving us something, we're giving them something. We're trading. We don't necessarily have to be independent, completely independent. Nobody can be completely independent. But as the modern phrase goes, we want to be interdependent. We want to all rely on each other. We want to be able to give something in return for the food rather than take it from a person. And again, as the Torah is telling us here, it's not just that we're ashamed to take. We want to take, but we want to take from God. The sustenance that God gives us in the form of a livelihood with which we can afford to buy food is what we want. We want to get it from God. We don't want to get it from people. Why? Why are we so intent on getting our food from God and not from people? And again, I'm taking this a little deeper than we usually think about it. We usually think of it as, I'm uncomfortable taking. And that's a natural human emotion. We all experience it. It's something that we pray for in benching. Whenever we eat bread, we bench. And when we bench, we're thanking God for the food. But there's a lot more in there that's not thanking God. There's a lot of prayers that we say in the benching. And one of them is, Al tasrichenu lidei matnas basar v'dam. Don't make us take gifts from other people. Pi'im liyadcha. Let us take from your hand. V'lo nevosh. V'lo nikalem. And let us never experience shame. So we're very ashamed to take from people, but as the Torah is telling us, and as the benching is telling us, it's not just that we're ashamed to take. There's a reason why we're ashamed to take. We're ashamed to take because we want to take from God. And we don't want to take from people. Why?
Yes, our ego.
That's what we would assume, but it doesn't seem that way. It's not our ego. We want to be dependent on God. We don't want to be dependent on people. There's a feeling of inadequacy if we can't be dependent on God. Perhaps we can understand that on one level as if I want to receive, I want God to feed me. I want God to take care of me. If he doesn't care enough about me to take care of me and someone else has to take care of me instead, I feel inadequate. I feel undeserving. God doesn't care about me enough to feed me directly. He feeds someone else, and that person will pass on the bounty to me. But God won't give it to me directly. So I feel inadequate. That could be part of the reason why we feel so much shame taking from other people, because we feel inadequate that God doesn't want to feed us, and he's just feeding someone else, and we're getting it from that person.
So that will give us the self-confidence that we get it from God.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
We'll feel the self-confidence that God gave it to us. And the other way, we feel very inadequate if God is unwilling to take care of us directly.
And then perhaps the happiness that we feel when we get our anasaf from Hashem and from someone else.
Yeah. That could be the lesson that this bird is teaching us. Now, as soon as I stop for questions, I predict that Dennis is going to have a question. because Dennis always has good questions, and he always takes things to their conclusion. And he's going to ask me, does that mean that someone who's poor and has to take from other people is a bad person? Am I saying that God doesn't like that person because he's making him beg from other people? So I'll answer that question before he asks. No, I'm not saying that. Because, first of all, there are many factors. There are always many factors in everything that happens to us. And there could be many reasons why a person has to be put in a position where he's poor and has to beg. And one factor could be that he is just an undeserving person and doesn't deserve that God should feed him directly. But that's only one possible factor. It's like saying there are certain health conditions that are more common in particular ethnic groups or a particular gender. Let's say, black men are more likely to get this particular disease, or white women are more likely to get this particular disease, or Jews. A lot of diseases are common to Jews, or specifically Ashkenazic Jews. So now you're going to ask the question, if someone has this disease, does that mean I'm black or I'm Hispanic? No, it doesn't. It's a factor that could increase your risk of this particular disease. And here in this case also, a reason why a person could need to beg is that God doesn't consider him worthy of being fed directly. But there could be many other factors. There is a deeper answer to that question, though, which we'll get to next week. But for now, stop the questions. Yes, Dennis, go ahead.
Same question?
I don't know. I can
Here, Dennis, you can unmute. Dennis, go ahead.
Computer's not working.
Okay. Let's go to the next question. A question was put forward. How do we know that Israel did not have the flood? Not sure. I don't know how we know that. The Gemara derives it from somewhere, but I'd have to look it up.
Because the burial place of the Adam and Eve.
Well, that might be the reason for it. Well, yeah, that's true. They remained intact. That could be a possible reason, or source, that the burial places remained intact. Oh, I know what I did. I forgot to unmute the thing. There you go. Okay, now, Dennis, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. What's an example where someone is actually receiving food directly from God? Unless they're a farmer and they produce it themselves, every other source, unless you're considering that you can pay for it, as being able to get it directly. I don't understand.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If God, we never get food directly from God, but when we have something to exchange for food, we're getting that directly from God. And the truth is, even that we don't get directly because we do some kind of work and we get paid for it. So there's no such thing in this world as getting 100% directly from God. And the truth is, even if we get a gift from someone else, that's also from God. But there are times when usually God gives us the skills to be able to make a certain amount of money and to use that money to buy food, as opposed to having to rely on someone else out of the goodness of their heart to give you the food.
Okay.
But more on that next week. We'll have a little bit of a deeper understanding of this next week. Are there any other questions? All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Hey,
Thank you.
So your ancestors, how far back